Hello Internet, Brendan here from Writer Storm. Today I'm with fellow author Jamie Mitchum in a series I'm calling Authors Interviewing Authors.
This is actually a really good opportunity for both of us because as authors we get asked a lot of questions as far as what our process might be as writers or how to get published, and maybe just some of our fans wondering when a new book is coming out. But one of the things we've noticed is that we get a lot of repeat questions.
Yeah, it's true. And while we love answering those questions, I thought it might be interesting to see an author's perspective on what he would want to know from his fellow author. A question that we get asked a lot, but I always found interesting, was what made you want to be a writer in the first place?
Well, I've always been around music. I've written music my whole life, but I never knew I wanted to be involved in books. I'm not a strong reader, beginning to be now, but I had this simple idea one day. It was a twig falling out of his family tree, and it's it stuck with me for whatever reason.
Right.
It's all I thought about while I was at work, and finally I made a story out of it, and it was a process 'cause it's my first time, but I got hooked. I started having all these ideas flood in, and like every book I've written, it's been a simple little idea that would just nag at me until I put pen to paper.
Sounds pretty par for the course for most writers.
What about you? I mean, writing as a hobby, you said you've done it your whole life. We've known each other for a while, but for me, it was really weird when you came to me with a book. Um, I didn't know you were that serious about it. When did you know you were a writer, not just as a hobby, but this is your life?
Yeah, I've been writing seriously since I was about 18. I wrote for a good 5 or 6 years, and I finished a few books. I tried to get them published. I either got rejections or didn't hear anything back. And at a certain point, you start to ask yourself, is it a hobby, or is it, you know, um, what you want to do as a career?
Right.
I think once you hit that crossroads, you have to make a decision. And I actually quit. I quit for a good year, and I would be just doing random daily things, and the ideas would come back to me, and the need to sort of write these stories and get something down. Like you said, it just nagged at you. And I think it was at that point that I knew, like, whether I wanted to or not, I was a writer.
Yeah. Same here.
Yeah, it's interesting. I write novels. Um, so I have tons of words where I can expand upon what I want my characters to do and what they're going through. I know most of what you've written is children's books, so I was just curious. What are some of the challenges you have in that small space and trying to get the story across?
There's some children's books that are simple. I've seen in stores, and it's quite frustrating, honestly. I wonder how in the world did this book get published?
Yeah.
It's A is for apple, B is for bear.
Right.
But there's some children's books that are really good, and it's very difficult actually because you're limited. You don't have a lot of words you can use,
Right.
and the limitations vary depending on the age group. And one of the struggles I have too is knowing if I want to say something with words or if I want to say it with a picture.
Right.
You know, there might be something that is an underlying issue, or something that I want to be real subtly said. So I'm not going to use words for that. I'll use a picture for that. And then there's something that absolutely needs to be addressed. I might use words for that. But it's difficult to have those limitations and to still try to
Right.
convey a story that not only a child can understand and appreciate, but that adults can actually be entertained by too and don't mind reading to their children.
Yeah, I could definitely see how that would be a challenge. Um,
One of the questions I had for you is, you came to me with Elemental. It was in a big 3-inch binder, pages printed out, and it was rough. You were just getting it together. That was like a shot in the dark. I had no idea you were even writing a book until you were done.
right.
What made you finish that book?
Well, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about before. Hobby versus career. which is it's kind of funny. I mean, writing's one of those things where anything else, you're playing basketball or any kind of sport, you can do it for fun, you can do it as a hobby. What's the one question we get asked more than anything? Are you published?
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
it's just one of those things where if you say you're a writer, you have to be a writer in people's eyes. You have to be pushing for publication. And that's kind of sad because I think writing as a hobby is good. I think more people should do it. It's kind of like you said, you express yourself, and but I think at a certain point, you have to say, is this going to just be a hobby, or am I going to take it seriously and try to get it out? I wrote fantasy for so long, swords and sorcery and horses, and when I took that break and kind of tried to figure out if I wanted to do this professionally or not, I really reassessed a lot of things. When I came back, I decided to change genres. The books I have out now are YA urban fantasy, and I just had a goal in mind when I started writing them, that if I could finish this book, I wasn't going to let anything stop me from trying to get it out. So yeah, that was, I mean, just I set my goal and I've been trying to accomplish it ever since. Um, Back to the children's book question. Writing a children's book, I know you end up using a lot of pictures. How is that, trying to find an artist and then having to give your work over to them, sort of let that go and trust that they'll get it right?
Right, it's tough. You know, obviously I illustrate my own books sometimes, but
Right.
I'm limited as an artist to what I'm capable of doing. A lot of times I see this image when I write a story. It's almost instant. It's like a movie being played, and I see all this wonderful imagery and everything, and it's the same that when you're writing music. I hear everything composed perfectly. All the parts are there. But then when I go back to what my position is as a writer, all I can do is put it on paper.
Right.
And if there's something that I'm not capable of doing and I send it to an artist, they don't have that story in their mind. They have words on a piece of paper that they have to interpret the way they see it, and I can try to explain it to them.
Right.
And I have, but it's difficult, and you have to know when to let things go. There's some things they're important enough. No, I have to have this because it is telling the story. And then there's other things that aren't necessarily telling the story. It's just personal preference.
Right.
And I can let those things go because in the end, it's still telling the story.
Makes sense.
So, you wrote Elemental, you wrote Ashes, you're on your third book now, and I've always wondered, this is the first book you decided to complete. How hard was it to write from a female perspective, especially a female that is dreamy about this guy and this love triangle with these two guys, and she's describing how they look and how she feels about them? Was that a challenge for you at all?
Well, first, thanks for the book plugs. Elemental Ashes, you heard it. Um, yeah, no, I actually have a review on Amazon where somebody talks about me writing from a female perspective. It's very flattering to get the compliment of saying that I'm doing it well. It's interesting. I mean, I was raised by a single mother. I had two sisters, so I've obviously, had the experience. But for me, really, and it's kind of simplistic, but women are people too. I mean, I know that sounds. When I write a character, I think anytime you write something that's not yourself, not your set of beliefs or your ethnicity or just anything that may differ from who you are personally, you have to be really careful to represent that well. But what I mainly try to do when I write a character is just start with what would I do from that situation, and then I expand upon it by adding in maybe societal norms or things that may affect that character. But I always want to keep them as realistic as possible.
Yeah.
I mean, Sophia, my main character, to me is sort of a version of myself. So when I write her, I mainly just try to keep her as fleshed out as possible.
Yeah.
That's mostly my approach to any character, no matter race or religion or ethnicity. It is something you have to be careful with because you want to represent it right. But I think sometimes people fall into the trap of making a caricature of that type of person. They end up sort of going one way or the other, and either making a very negative caricature or sort of putting them up on a pedestal because they don't want to offend somebody. I think it's a balancing act, just like anything else with a story.
Yeah.
Um, all right, so here's the big question. You're published. You're with one of the big 5 publishers. They're happy with your book sales. They basically come to you and say, you can write any book you want. What book is it?
Well, hopefully I would have this book published already, but if not, then it definitely would be the Elect series.
Oh, okay.
It's a trilogy that I want to write. It's been on my mind for a few years. I have too much baggage right now to even start on it because it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to consume me.
Right.
But as soon as I finish up these few projects that I have, I'm going to work on it and really dedicate the time to it. The reason I would choose that book is because, for one, it's just going to be fun to write. You know, it's science fiction, and, you know, I get to play with reality and then stuff outside of our norms and what's considered reality to us. But honestly, I get to tell my story. I always try to write children's books that are helping somebody. You know, there's a message behind it that's good, but my story doesn't necessarily have a positive message behind it.
Right.
You know, a lot of people's doesn't. It's just a real story, and I think that's what's wonderful about writing. You know, it's not like construction. You know, you get lumber and tools and you construct a house. While that's an amazing accomplishment, writing is
Pulled
on a
from the
different
ether.
level. Yeah, I mean, you take absolutely nothing, and then you construct these people's relationships, their fears, their wants, their desires. You construct their family history, their heritage. You construct their entire world, and you do all of this, honestly, from nothing.
Yeah.
You know, and I just think with music or with books, when you have this finished product, and it came from nowhere but inside your mind, that's a beautiful thing. And that's what makes me absolutely love writing.
I agree. It's you could almost say it's a magical thing. It's something that you can't really put your finger on. I mean, that's if you go on YouTube or anywhere else, you can find tons of videos on how to write, or there's books on it. But nobody can really nail it down because it's such a personal thing.
Yeah.
Well, I think this was a pretty good question and answer thing from one author to another. I hope
Yeah.
you guys enjoyed it. I definitely plan on doing more, and I'm sure you're going to see more of this guy.
Hopefully.
Be sure to check out the links at the end of the video. I'm going to have some linking back to his Facebook, Twitter, a few other things that he may have. So hope you guys enjoyed it. This is Brandon Axe, and
Jamie Mitchum, you guys take care.
this has been Writer Storm.